Chronicles, and I got a great MythLab for you guys today. Just going to allow a few people to get in here before we really get it started. But today's MythLab, we're going to talk about these archetypes of renewal. That's really what we're going to come with. Like, this is a kind of in line with what I've been doing. I've been typically taking a couple of different archetypes and just kind of showing them together, just kind of showing how they're connected, kind of comparing them, in, straight up the chronology, like the when, the where, and the how. So we have three here that we're going to talk about that I think are going to be really, 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 really insightful in terms of what we're learning, I hope at least. And, we're going to start with some familiar and some unfamiliar, at least for me. So we've got a couple of new ones, right? I need a pronunciation, so I'm just working on I'm just going to get a pronunciation for this name so I can get this name right. This is for the Aztec. Please provide a pronunciation guide for this name, please. But we see Oshun. I have an Oshun prominently in the middle of the screen. And of course, this comes from, this is West Africa, right? This is West Africa, and it's bled over in time into South America and American culture, right? Then next to her, the Aztec, who is Xochiquetzal. Xochiquetzal is the Aztec figure that we see here. Very strikingly beautiful woman. And then we have Prende, who comes from, I want to say it's Mediterranean culture, but I'm going to have to get into this in the reading of it. Right? We're going to confirm all this because I'm kind of coming off the cuff right now. Okay. So for the people in, thank you for stopping in. Let me get on task so I can at least monitor if you guys decide you have some questions, because I am here for your mythological queries. That's the whole point of what we're doing here. So let me get to that. Let me go to my channel here, and I'm just trying to see if we're going to get a few more people in, because there's always stragglers that come in. But that's okay, because it's a live stream. Okay. So when we're talking about this archetype, we're talking about renewal. And what do we mean with renewal? Now, renewal is the mythic answer to entropy. And I actually hadn't thought about this. There's a ton of guys, there's a ton of gods out there that are entropy gods. And maybe tomorrow I'll actually get in explaining entropy and why it's important. And I've talked about some other deities. Because entropy is not death. Entropy is a natural force that wears things down, right? So entropy is always going off. Entropy never stops. It starts right now. I'm experiencing entropy right now. Like, it's tearing me down. It's trying to stop me from talking. It's trying to stop me from shining within my own destiny like we all want to do. But this is renewal, and this is why renewal is so important, because we're constantly being faced with that level of entropy. This is why it's important. Okay. So typically, human societies all experience levels of decline. This is normal for us. We have seasonal death, right? Which is winter, which is drought, which we're always fighting against those things. These are early ancestors. They were always fighting against, drought and death, right? That's why we have all these rain gods. Rain gods and fertility gods were directly fighting against entropy. Entropy is always the bad guy, right? Entropy is 100% the bad guy every single time. But decline or entropy is not just seasonal death or winter. And we have lots of explanations for winter. We got Persephone, and I explicitly did not want to talk about Persephone in this regard, because we know about Persephone already, right? We understand we get it already, Persephone. Jesus, move aside and let somebody else talk for a little while, okay? But even beyond like your seasonal deaths, we're also talking about emotional exhaustion. We're talking about cultural suppression. We're talking about generation turnover and post-conflict rebuilding. So renewal deities emerge in cultures that understand one simple truth, is that without replenishment, life itself collapses. So renewal is not just about spring weather, right? It operates on a lot deeper levels than simply that component, right? So that's how we have to address it. And these goddesses are going to go about it in different ways. So there is natural renewal, which we're agriculture. We're talking water cycles. We're talking about fertility. We're talking about bloom. Then there's emotional renewal, which is joy returning after grief. That's a very important component. It's being sweet after bitterness has happened, or loss or sadness. It's also sensuality after deprivation. There is cultural renewal, which is the preservation of identity, the continuity of woman, home, ritual, and generational survival. Our people continue, right? And those are the three aspects that these three deities all kind of work in from various cultures all over the world, right? So Oshun, Prende, and let me get this name right, which is Xochiquetzal. Xochiquetzal. If I say it faster, I kind of get a little bit better. But you see, guys, I'm putting a lot into making sure that I'm representing these cultures as properly as possible. Now, these three represent three very distinct renewal mechanisms. They're not copies of each other. They're actually more like cultural echoes, all representing different cosmology. So Oshun is renewal through flow. So because she's primarily water, and we know that water restores whatever has been dried out. That's the power of water, and we count on it for doing that. Prende is renewal through flame, right? Because she is centered on the hearth. That's something that's very different and seems so directly opposite to what Oshun does. But when we see how it manifests itself, it's really not. This is continuity through hardship, right? And Xochiquetzal, she is renewal through bloom. And we can see that. That's why she's adorned with the flowers, right? So what she represents is youth and beauty replacing decay. So there are three structural elements that we're going to deal with when we talk about these three goddesses. We're going to talk about water, we're going to talk about fire, and we're going to talk about the floral earth, right? Which is kind of a clean way to get into it. So we're going to give it a little bit of framework in terms of how they're similar, and we'll talk about how they're different. But I think the similarities is the most important component for the MythLab, right? Let's talk about why all these various peoples continued to develop the same type of deities or the same type of ideologies about deities at different parts of the world. So we'll get into that part as well. And I've got a great timeline here that I'm going to go through for you guys as well, so we can know like when they come about. And here, I'll start off from the back. I always like to let you guys know a little bit. Man, my foot's itching here. What's going on here? These deities go as far back as 2000 BCE. I'm not going to tell you right now who's the oldest one. I'm not going to say who started this gangsta stuff, right? But we're going to pick that up pretty easily and how they developed. And by the end of it, we're going to know where they started at, as far as the time period, to who's still being served with respect and offerings even today. Because these deities have not died out. And I'm going to think it's almost all of them. Now, I'm looking at my timeline sheet here, and I think we've got a lot of room for growth on all these, and we're going to see how the parts of the world matter. But let's talk about Oshun first, because that's my favorite. I'm actually most familiar with Oshun, so I'm going to start off with who I know. Now, Oshun is one of the most remarkable figures in almost any belief system. Now, obviously, she comes from the Yoruba belief system. So we're talking about ultimately the people in what we now call Nigeria or Benin, right? That's structurally the land that she comes from. So her original name, Oshun, is from the Yoruba belief system itself, and she is specifically tied to rivers. And this is what her name is also associated with. Now, she is known by some variants to that name because her bag travels very well, right? She's been around the world, right? So she's known by a slightly different version in Brazil or in the Condolambi belief system, where she is Oxum, right? Again, man, existent. So this is where she comes from, and it's the same goddess, but this is a Portuguese, spelling adaptation to who she is. Didn't change her fundamentally. She's still the river. She's still fertility and gold and sweetness. She's still all that good stuff, right? That's 100% who she is. The name also varies when she goes to Cuba, and she's associated with Santeria and the other beliefs from there. And it's slightly, it's Ochun, Ochun. So again, in Santeria practice, she's heavily synchronized with Our Lady of Charity or El Cobre, which is a Catholic Marian figure. So this is a lot about her survival under colonial Catholic pressure and how she still survived. She went through all this Catholic pressure, and they're trying to erase her, and she still walks out of that smelling like roses, right? She still endure, and she's still definitely growing, right? So this is all the stuff we can see about Oshun right off the bat. Now let's talk about her titles, because I love to hear the titles. Like, I hope I have a good title. I hope I have a bunch of nicknames that people call me that sound really cool, like the Desolate One. Like, I wouldn't mind that title, right? But let's talk about Oshun's, because that's why we're here, right? She is known literally as the owner of sweetness. I mean, damn, that really fits her, man. When I'm looking at her, I'm like, you know what? If your name was really fitting who you were, this is working for you, Oshun. 100%, this is working for Oshun. I definitely see her as the owner of sweetness, right? She's also called the mother of rivers, which is aptly appropriate. I've always connected that. She's also called she who adorns herself with brass and gold, and she whose presence brings prosperity. So that says a whole lot about Oshun. Now, who she is in the major, she is a major Orisha in the Yoruba religious system of West Africa. So she's an OG. She's one of the higher ranking, and I think literally structurally among the most powerful. I think because Yamoja is her daughter, I think she's at the top of it, especially since she is the one who's represented, the closest association with water, which is life, right? So they don't run from that at all. So she's a very, very powerful deity. She's the goddess of rivers. She has fertility. This is her bag. I'm going to break her bag out for you. So we've got rivers, fertility, obviously beauty, right? She ain't missing that one. Love, of course. She got sweetness. I can feel it. Diplomacy, prosperity, and emotional balance, right? So she's not minor in any way. She is full-fledged, and she is 100% central to this belief system and how it develops. And there's some great stories about Oshun and creation and protection. She has this incredible mythology that's connected to the people, the children of the diaspora. Because look, let's be honest, without her, she's not abstract symbolism, right? You can't exist without her. If there was not water, there is no survival. Without the river, there's no civilization, right? In the early cultures, even modern cultures, we have to build your civilizations around water, right? Now we've got a little more flexibility because we can pipe water in and all that stuff. But particularly for older civilizations, if there was not a river, a lake, a body of water, you simply didn't build a civilization there because you were dooming yourselves to destruction. So from the beginning, from her earliest inceptions, and we'll talk about when she was first conceived of as a being, she was tied to the continuity of life. That never goes away. She never loses that component, and I think that's the most special component of who she is. Now, let's talk about the people themselves who worship her. And this is the Yoruba people, who are an ethnic group native primarily to what we call now southwestern Nigeria, as well as parts of Benin and Togo. So this is a culture that has been around since the first millennium. So they have a long history established during the first millennium. Their sacred city is Ife. Ife. It becomes a major spiritual and cultural center even to today. And they have complex city-states that developed out of this through this civilization. And their religious systems were very highly structured and very codified. So Yoruba religion is not primitive folklore in that sense. It is very different in the sense it is a highly organized cosmology with priesthoods, with divination systems, Ifa, and layered theology, right? This is a very complex system that really can't even be understood in simple terms. And I still suggest talking to people within the belief systems to fully get comprehension of what the belief systems actually mean. So geographically, her worship begins in the southwest of Nigeria, particularly around the Oshun River area and the sacred groves near Osogobo, right? So this is where she's rooted off. Literally, there's a river that is named after her, the Oshun River. So this is branding at the highest level. Now, in terms of chronology, she begins with oral tradition. So the oral tradition predates the written records. So worship formalized of her probably about between 1500 and 1,000 years ago. So if we say now, we're looking at Jesus, man, like 3,500 years of actual formalized worship for this deity. And she's continued strong throughout from the pre-colonial Africa into modern times. This is where she is. Because during the slave trade, that religion spread by force. They rooted the people out of Africa, but they didn't root out the belief systems as much as they tried. And Catholicism was the easiest system for them to maintain it. Because Catholics have the saints, it's very easy to assign the sainthood to these deities from West Africa. So they kept it alive in Brazil, in Cuba, in Haiti, and in the diasporic communities, and into the Americas as well. We're no different. We do have, through our Creole connection, we see a lot of that come about. All right. So not only does she survive colonization, she survives colonization, and she's as strong as ever right now. She adapts. First, she becomes synchronized with the Catholic figures, particularly Our Lady of Charity. And so then when the cultural renewal, which has been recent, has marked back, she's right back on the scene. I don't know if you guys remember, this is, man, maybe a decade ago. I'm older, so, man, I lose track of time like it's nothing. But there was a point where I think the singer Beyonce, if you're familiar with her, during her first pregnancy, she does a photo while she's pregnant, and she's modeling Oshun. People were like, "Oh, it's not the Virgin Mary," and I'm like, "No, that's not the Virgin Mary. It's literally her representing Oshun." So so that was a big brouhaha, and it kind of just showed like how we're lacking. Hey, welcome in, Kat. It kind of showed how we weren't able to fully grasp what she was doing. But it was a great moment, and when I saw it, it kind of changed my opinion of her, and it's been positive ever since then, because I'm like, oh, you actually know your stuff. Like, you're not just grasping at straws and doing cosplay. You actually kind of do your stuff. So I'm going to leave it at that in terms of why I messed with her because of that. But it was a great representation of what Oshun really was. Now, Oshun is also more than just romance. Like, she's loving, but what she represented to the people was fresh water. And in that area, rivers are the anchor. So she ensured that the crops were going to survive. She ensured that you go fishing. She ensured that there was drinking water. And this also preserved trade routes. So without her, famine just takes over. You're not trading, you're not thriving. So she governs pregnancy. Again, the reference to Beyonce is that she represents both fertility and continuity. So she governs pregnancy and childbirth, and women petition her for conception, safe delivery. You know what? I've typically lived by. I've always lived by bodies of water. It's kind of weird. Even when I moved here from Albuquerque, most recently, there's a river. I'm in the South now. There's a river not that far away from me. My neighbor keeps a boat in his yard, right? And goes fishing. So like living, and even by the ocean. When I was in California, I went to school in Santa Barbara. So I love living around bodies of water. I love rivers. I'm a beach guy. I think that falls under Yemoja maybe more than Oshun, but I can still mess with them. So I'm definitely about being around river. But Oshun was also rooted to protection of children. And that part is the generational part, right? The protecting the mothers, protecting the children, allowing for conception. Those are all rooted into like generational continuity. Okay. Now, the part I really like, that Oshun represents sweetness. And this isn't softness. This is sweetness balances aggression. So she is diplomacy that where others bring warfare or threats, she brings sweetness and diplomacy. And there are attempts, there's a myth where the male Orishas attempt to create the world without her, and their efforts fail. They can't do it without her. They can't. That's what she told them. She's like, come on, man, you can't do it without me. Because they lack softness. And creation requires more than force. And this was a powerful civilizational message. Because You needed that aspect, and if you try to do it without her, you're going to fail. Now, Oshun also governs joy. She's about happiness too. I feel happy just talking about her, right? Like she's that kind of deity, right? I feel happy talking about her. So this was joy. This was sensuality. This is also about adornment. You see, she knows how to adorn herself. And her sweetness is also tied to pleasure, right? We're not going to get, you can't, you want the fertility, there's some stuff that goes on before that. And she's 100% down with that as well. If you're going to conceive, there's some stuff we got to do here to work together. And after hardship, this is where her sweetness matters, because after hardship, this is what kind of restore your psyche. Her sweetness allows us to kind of maintain our humanity even while going through very difficult things. So when we talk about Oshun, we have to talk about structurally how important she is. That she is food, she is life, that she is the renewal part. She's every single component of renewing for humans. And again, it's water. Try and take water out of your life and see what happens. Pretty quickly, it ain't going to collapse. Now, let's talk about her worship, right? This is an important part. At least for her, it's important. And probably for all of you guys who want some water later on today too, is how do you actually worship her? And again, people within the community are going to have a much better understanding of this. But as an outsider, I can say that I've heard that she likes honey. I'm not going to lie. She has a thing for honey. She has a sweet tooth. Guess you can't be sweet without a sweet tooth. She also likes yellow and gold. Like you can see, she's properly adorned. So if you were going to give her a gift, like a dress or something like that, yellow's probably going to be what she likes. She loves river ceremonies. She goes crazy over river ceremonies like nobody's business. And she likes festivals. She likes to dance. She likes sacred dances, right? And she likes festivals. Now, there's still festivals, fortunately for all the rest of us, going on in Nigeria today, still honoring her. And that's the important thing, right? She is not an ancient figure who is dead. She is actively worshipped, and this actually matters. So when we talk about Oshun and her renewal, it's broad. She's renewal through just natural flow, ecological renewal through water, emotional renewal through her sweetness and diplomacy, generational renewal, because of fertility, and cultural. You have me thinking of something about honey. I don't think about honey too, right? And she replenishes all that. It never gets depleted, right? So this is really who she is. One of the more complete and powerful deities that we'll talk about in terms of renewal. Not the boring renewal, but the real nitty, like let's have some fun, eat some honey, and bring our gold stuff. And then there's Prende. And Prende is the hearth. You can see her, right? She's right here, right? Striking woman, right? Now the hearth is more domestic. I don't know if that's a statement about her, but domestic life was extremely important as well. She herself is associated with renewal in a couple of different ways, and we're going to talk about it. Now, where she comes from geographically is North Albania. And that's why I wanted to talk about her, because first of all, nobody ever talks about her. You're like, who? And it's important that we start talking about some of the other deities that had significance, right? She is obviously associated not only with renewal through the hearth, she got the flame right there, but she's also love and beauty and fertility and springtime and protection of women and the hearth fire. And her name likely comes from some older Indo-European root word, either connected to fire or brightness, right? Prende. So that's where she comes from. Yeah, exactly who? Like, why are we talking? But now we're going to know about her, right? So her name has had some variations over the years. And Albanian myth was primarily preserved through oral tradition for years, right? So that's why the alterations kind of vary, like this village telling a story, and that village telling a story, but we're able to hold her together. Now, after the Christianization of Albania, she was synchronized with Saint Anne, who is the mother of the Virgin Mary. In some regions, her spring festival has been attached to Saint Anne's feast. And for rural women, she's still seen as fertility rites under the Christian name. So she didn't necessarily lose who she was. She just kind of like, you got to get in where you fit in. Oshun does something very similar, right? And we'll see if this other goddess, this Aztec the goddess also kind of slips in hidden, right? I'm going to assume that she does. But what she represents is also renewal through adaptation. So let's talk about who she was. Okay. Prende appears to be, pre-Christian goddess whose primary worship survived in folk tales long after the paganism faded. These were Indo-European tribes inhabiting the Western Balkans before the Roman conquest. So she functioned herself like a domestic goddess, right? A fertility protector, a guardian of women, and a springtime renewal figure. She had a lot of stuff going on. Her bag is pretty deep. And unlike the Roman system, Albanian paganism did not leave behind, elaborate written myth cycles. So what we have is more ritual survival, which still tells us, one very major thing about her is that she was important enough to endure, right? No matter what she says. And I'm telling you guys, if we look at the chronology of it, she's at the top of the list, right? I'll go through the chronology later, but she might be the oldest one in terms of her worship over all the rest of them, right? That's where she is. Her people were Albanian. These are people of Kosovo. This is parts of Bosnia. This is Western North Macedonia, right? So this is some uncharted territory for me in terms of talking about deities. So I'm glad today that I actually brought her in here and I was kind of able to blend this together. I think it's important. After the Roman conquest, which is 2nd century BCE, and later the Byzantine and Ottoman periods, the older belief systems were, like in a lot of places, they were absorbed, they were suppressed, sometimes they were transformed. She became Christianized early on, and then later she even gets kind of Islamicized, if that's a proper term for it, under the Ottoman rule. But no matter what, whether it's the Catholics, whether it was the Muslims, whatever, she just kept going along. The folk tales about her continued, and she's still primarily in those regions: North Albanian highland tradition, mountain communities, and domestic rural spaces where she exists. She is not an imperial goddess. She didn't have a throne. She didn't rule. They didn't see her in that regard. But she was definitely, for the rural people, she was all about survival. So looking at her chronology, right, is that she probably began prior to the 2nd century. She survived through Roman and Byzantine periods in folk religions, and she was later synchronized in approximately the 5th to the 12th centuries. And she continues in this rural Albanian customs into the modern era. So Albanians right now, somebody's probably making an offering to her right now. Just like somebody, look, I'm going to leave here and go get some honey to go give to Oshun later. I think I got some honey in the kitchen. Somebody's probably going to get whatever she likes. Maybe it's a hearth. I don't know what her specifics were, but she's still being honored right now in those regions. North Albania, mountain regions, hearth-centered domestic spaces. So unlike Oshun, whose worship is very institutionally organized, Prende survives through memory and ritual continuity. So she's on a finer line. She's got a finer line than Oshun, which is why I think it's very important to continue to talk about her, right? And then let's talk about her people, because she's surviving. She exists because of the people, and she's surviving also because of the people, right? So she was never like large-scale river system or cosmological creation. Her power is far more intimate. She is the hearth renewal. So she governs the sacred fire of the home. And that sounds divine to me, man. Like the home is warm. So this is associated with cooking, heat, family gatherings, and being a spiritual center starting at the home. If the hearth dies, the home collapses. So what she's really protecting is continuity. Now, she also was big on protecting women. She was invoked in protection of women. She was invoked for fertility. So if you weren't having a baby, you call on her. She helps you with that. She helps keep children safe. She has protection for young brides. And she's also associated with beauty and matrimonial harmony. And I can see a lot of that. Very beautiful, striking depiction of this lady. And in mountain clans, women are the ones who are the carriers of lineage. I didn't know that. That's important. I learned something today, even if I wasn't even trying, right? That's great things about these MythLabs. Just sit there and chill out. You're probably going to learn something you didn't know, right? Whether it's going to help you in life, I don't know. But hey, Spreading knowledge is a sincerest form of love. So when we look at her as a carrier of lineage, then protecting the women becomes about protecting future generations. And that their civilization renewal, it's small scale. Like she's much smaller scale than Oshun, but equally as important, right? She's like your mom. Yeah, right. Like a mom. Like that's what she looks like. She's cooking, she's keeping the family together, she's protecting. That is what we kind of think of like a mom. 100%, I would agree with that. So she does operate on I'm going to keep individual households together, which is massively important for keeping a community together. So I love that. Now she's also associated with springtime rituals. So the end of the winter hardship, which was obviously very important for these people, she also handles agricultural preparation. You can't say springtime is coming; it means you got to get to work, right? And the renewal of domestic life, so cleaning cycles, things like that. So it's not dramatic, yet it's extremely steady. And it's quiet flame that burns long after the coal. So her core identity is in sometimes the simplest things. That's kind of the amazing thing about the power of this goddess who I'm telling you, we're talking like 4,000 years that we've been talking about this deity. And she's still here right now, right? That's amazing. I was impressed by the Lakers having 17 championships. She's still going on right now, live and direct. So she's different from Oshun. If Oshun is renewal through flow, she is renewal through, I would say, stability. That's kind of what she is. She's more cultural preservation, domestic resilience, continuity under occupation, which they both kind of represent, right? And adaptation to synchronization, which we're seeing. This is how some of these older gods and belief systems are surviving because they're sneaky. They're like, I'm gonna get in here. Yeah, I got a different name. I have multiple IDs. I had to do that in my time myself. So she doesn't explode like flowers. That's not who she is, but she is endurance. And I think the hearth represents that. She's like, I endure, the family endures, so the community endures, and they're still here, unaffected by it. And I gotta say, man, to the people of Albania, you guys are doing a beautiful job keeping your culture together. 100%. If there's anyone of Albanian descent listening to this, you guys are doing a beautiful job. I would love to encourage you guys to continue sticking to your traditions and speaking about them as loudly as possible. Maybe you don't feel like you want to share with the rest of us, and I get that too. But if it helps, like I'm down, I'm supportive of the culture, right? So let's look at what her ritual and cultural markers would be. This will give us some insight into what she wants. So early springtime observations, household centering offerings, okay, female centered rites, and association with light and with fire. So her myth is sparse. Like there's not a lot of mythological tales. I couldn't find a mythological tale. And I'm telling you guys, I looked for more than just a little bit of time, right? So that absence of myth, this doesn't change. So she wasn't maybe the dramatic storyteller goddess, but she was present in everyday life, right? And you're right about that special place open on the fireplace. It's always an honored place. Whoever you put on the mantle above the fireplace, that's usually core for family, right? Like your mom has like a fireplace like that, right? It's always core. So the fireplace is still treated kind of like the sacred place, even right now. And we love seeing that. So her renewal classification is, again, I said Oshun was renewal through water flow, and Prende is renewal through the flame. So she's more domestic renewal, generational protection, cultural endurance, and she's a stabilizing force of the feminine force. Oshun replenishes when it's dried out. Prende protects what must not go out. That's kind of the difference. If this flame goes out, we have problems. And she's like, I'm not having it. She's not gonna allow that to happen. So far we've got two legs of our triad here. And I'm looking at this beautiful Aztec goddess here, who I gotta get her name, Xochiquetzal. Xochiquetzal. Because if I ever meet her, I want it to be like, hey, Xochiquetzal, or whatever comes out, right? And she has a lot of names too. Well, she has some deep meaning, right? Xochiquetzal, her name, the Xochi part, literally means flower. Xochi. And I think that's beautiful. Why are you guys not sharing this with us more, right? And the Quetzal part means precious flower, beautiful value. Like Quetzalcoatl has that same meaning. He is like the plumed serpent. It has something to do, or the feathered serpent. So that always kind of fits into it with the Xochi and the Quetzal part. So her name roughly translates to precious flower, which I'd be like, you definitely look like a precious flower to me, okay? Or flower or feather. So we kind of can see that. And the Quetzal bird is symbolized with beauty and rarity in Mesoamerica. So her name itself encodes beauty and value, which is appropriate. She seems like she encodes beauty when we're sitting up here looking at her, right? Now, who was she? Obviously, she's from the Mexica. Again, the Mexica name, I'm trying to get the pronunciation of that right, is really what we used to call Aztecs, or some of us still do, right? Because Aztec wasn't a term that the people ever called themselves. It was an outsider term, and we're just getting revealed that that actually isn't what they would have. They never would have heard that. If you went back there in time and you call them that, they wouldn't even know who you were talking about. But if you see the Mexica, or I'm assuming that's how it's being pronounced, you guys confirm that? She was associated with flowers and youth and beauty and love and sexuality and fertility, which goes along with that, and also female artisans, so weavers, embroiderers, also pleasure and adornment, and like, yeah, she's 100% all that. You're doing a beautiful job, Xochi, all that stuff, right? So she's not a domestic hearth goddess in that respect. She's not a river goddess, but she is renewal through bloom, right? She's visible, she's sensual, she's aesthetic renewal. So let's talk about the people who we like to call the Aztecs. And these are people who thrived in what is central Mexico around the 14th through the 16th century. So again, we know about their capital city is what is now modern day Mexico. This was a highly urban civilization. They had advanced agriculture. I mean, beautiful agriculture, amazing agriculture. They had very strong ritual and sacrificial religious systems, and they had a deep cyclical cosmology, right? Deep in like the 5 ages. It goes on and on. So in Mesoamerican thought, time was cycle and it was fragile, and the world had already ended multiple times. I'm telling you guys, this is the 5th time around. This is the 5th time. We are the 5th age. We are the 5th sun, according to these guys, right? And I'm not going to tell you guys what happened to the other 4, but suffice it to say, they ain't here. That's all I'm going to say, is that they're like, it's a cycle, and you guys are the 5th time going around. And I'm going to tell you a secret. It was highly debatable whether they were going to do this 5th age. There was actually some real talk about not creating us, okay? I don't know if that sticks in your craw the way it sticks in mine, but duly noted, right? I have to check that off, that you guys kind of weren't even really that excited about creating us, right? And I'm like, imagine, I'm not going to leave that one off. I had a joke for that, but it's not appropriate. Okay, but anyway, so where she developed geographically was central Mexico, the Valley of Mexico, and in the major cities. This is pre-Aztec association with flowers. So her chronology before the Aztec, she was associated with flowers and fertility, and her worship really explodes in the imperial period, about 1300 to about 1521. But of course, here comes Spanish. Here we go, right? Here we go. And of course, they want to impose Catholicism, right? And she survives that by cultural memory, and the academia reconstructed her. So unlike Oshun, who's still actively today, Xochi's ritual structure has been largely dismantled because of colonization. But she is still there. So let's see what she represented to her people, and then we're going to talk about her on the timeline before I wrap it all up, right? So she embodies young femininity, and in a civilization conscious of cosmic endings, youth is very important because it symbolizes their continuity. She represents the next generation. She represents erotic vitality and reproductive power. That's who she is. Flowers are seen as a sacred power. They symbolize poetry. They symbolize truth. They're metaphors for war. They're sacred offerings. So flower and song was a phrase that they used to talk about the aesthetics and also the spiritual growth. So while she governs flowers, she governs aesthetics and spiritual expression. This is renewal through beauty. Yeah, I mean, man, like, you know what? Like flowers, embroidery, like all that stuff is kind of, maybe you guys are drawn on that. Maybe it is that mixture. I don't know, but clearly there's some connective tissue about it, right? We can clearly see that, right? I mean, obviously. But she's also erotic and sensual energy, so she's associated with sexual desire and marriage and pleasure and female adornment. So all these things. Not any casual indulgence. Like clearly she's not about casual indulgence, but she is about sexual virility in terms of population continuity. That's a very important thing. Because without erotic energy, right, civilization dies. So she keeps that fire and desire, like Rick James talked about. You guys know that song, Fire and Desire? That's what she's talking about. That's what I used to do. Anyway, I'm not getting to my whole Rick James thing. So she protects the weavers, the embroiderers, the female creative labor. She's protecting that. So she would love you and your embroidery. You and your mom, right there. She's got your back. Anybody messes with you, so she help. She's going to be right there for you. And at the core, she is representative of this mythical paradise. Her myths are often tied to beauty, temptation, and fertility altogether. She's not a tragic descent like Persephone, but she is still very much a vibrant presence. And I'm going to talk about her mythology at another time. You don't know about Rick James? Oh my, okay. I'm glad. I'm sorry that you heard Rick James lyrics coming out of my voice for the first time, right? And blame my mother for this, right? It's a song called Fire and Desire. Rick James, Tina Marie. That's a combo that you can't beat, right? Rick James and Tina Marie. It's a great song. I'm telling you, it's a great old school song, right? Why that popped into my head right now, I have no idea. But her festivals, when she had her festivals, were about floral offerings or about dormant rituals. They were celebrations tied to seasonal cycles. There were ceremonies that were involving women, especially the young girls, bringing them into the tradition. So it was the older women in the village or the community bringing the younger girls in there and teaching them all these things that were ultimately they're going to be under their domain. This was a lot about color. It was about display. It was about life just blooming, right? All those things were blooming. So her classification is renewal through the bloom. That youth replacing the age, that erotic vitality, restoring stagnation, artistic expression, renewing the culture. And that's important for what you were talking about with flowers and embroidery. Like cultural expression keeps us alive. It gives us like a flair to us, to our existence. So she is, very much life returning. So we've got three different geographies we got Albania, we have West Africa, and we have Mesoamerica. All kind of giving you different forms of renewal and all being equally important, right? So we can say that. And let's look at the timeline because I did bring this up. Now, if we go back to the earliest indication of these goddesses, we're going back 2,000 years ago. We see Prende in the Balkan regions, and this was the first precursors to her. By 1200 BCE, she's more formalized as a local hearth. God, why don't I just bring this over here instead of looking? Well, she's more formalized by 1200 BCE. Okay. Later in that period of time, we start to see the early roots of what Xochi would be in Mesoamerica. So this 1200 BCE time, we're seeing a crossover between at least two of the goddesses. And we're talking the Balkans, we're talking the West Valley of Mexico. And then right after that, okay, so at 1000 BCE, this is where we start getting the development of the Orisha system. So the Orisha system, of course, is what would lead to Oshun, who's our central figure that we're talking about from them. About 200 BCE, the Romans are already in, so we're starting to see synchronization, especially from Prende. She's already kind of being absorbed and synchronized. By 400, Common Era, we see the same thing. She's fully immersed as being, she's beginning to be merged with St. Anne by that period of time. By 900 BCE, she's surviving through oral tradition and domestic tradition. So she's still in full survival mode. 100 years later, now we start to see the centralization of Orisha worship. So this is where Oshun's worship really starts to be a lot more solidified, right? At 1000 BC, a couple of, okay, now at 1200 CE, now we're in a common era, the river becomes the center of her, so Oshun River becomes the center of her devotion, right? This is where she's central at. Okay, I don't know why I can't zoom this in. Okay. So let's say by 1300, we swing back over to the Valley of Mexico, and Xixi is integrated into the state religion. By this period of time, by 1400, she's got full-on festivals that are dedicated to her. So flower and artisan rituals are embedded in their civic calendar. Okay, by 1400, or excuse me, by 1500, in the Oshun's worship extends into the political sphere. So as far as Yorubaland, she starts to become integral in state level cosmology. So she's gone from just being associated with the river to the statehood is embracing her as well. Later on that time, we see that, in Mexico, we start to see the state worship being dismantled by the Catholic rule. So Xochi is in trouble at this point because she's fully under attack. Okay. By 1600, we're fully immersed in the slave trade. Now, this is what carries Oshun. This is how she gets here. She came on the slave boats because she was with the people and they were crying for her. And there's a lot of mythologies about that story that are they're really, really deep. Further, at that same time period, we also see Xixi is still persisting. She's been removed. So I think Oshun is still on the upper trend, where Xochi's kind of being a little bit more marginalized, right? By 1700 in Cuba, Oshun, as now she's adapted into the colonial system in Cuba. By 1800 in Albania, the pre-Christian elements are formally documented. So this is important for Prende because this is nearly 4,000 years or 3,600 years after her initial inception that were actually being documented in ideas of preservation. By 1900, in Brazil and Cuba, Oshun is active and a strong religious presence. Further in that time, now we're starting to see more formalized study of Xochi. This is what I mentioned, she had been reconstructed in the academic literature, which was a very important time. Okay. 2004, Age of Mythology, the Titans. Man, I played this game, and this game, I still have this game. I remember I have a different version of it, but Age of Mythology is a great game, and it's probably tied to my love of mythology. And that the Mesoamerican deity, so Xochi, is integrated digitally. She becomes digital. She's in a video game. There's probably somebody in the world playing that game right now. I know I play a lot of old games. I haven't bought any new games in like 2 years, but I have lots of old games, and I'll go back and play them over again. 2005, Oshun is affirmed, like the global historical worship of Oshun is continued. So we're seeing her globally. She's rooted in. 2005, her sacred grove is recognized as a World Heritage Site. This is a major win. So the adaptation of her is at its apex. This is where we're getting to. 2017, we're seeing the rise of what they call Afrofuturistic or Afro-spiritualism is rising here in the West or globally. And this is an absolute boast to the Orishas and a boost to Oshun. By 2020, we're starting to see we have a renewed interest in the Balkan pagan heritage. So for Prende, you just got digitized. You just made it into the digital revival, and she's referenced in their cultural heritage discussion. So we're seeing 3 goddesses that have been surviving in total, roughly 4,000 years, 4,200 years overall, which says a lot, which says that each one of them held a particular importance. They were all extremely important, not only for their cultures, but clearly they're moving past their cultures. And through mechanisms like maybe this show, talking about them, they continue to be around. Like I'll talk about them, and one of you guys listening to this is writing a comic book right now. One of you guys stopped in only because, man, I'm writing a comic book and I need some ideas. Or I'm about to make a video game and I'm tired of using the same goddess. I don't want to throw Athena out there 100 times over and over and over. So somebody's going to pick this up and they're going to talk about it in a different light. They're going to reimagine them in a book. She'll be part of a video game. She'll be part of, I don't know. I don't know what it could, movie, whatever it is. We're continuing. And let us say, I know it seems odd to give video game guy credit for anything, but they do keep the names alive. They never get the stories right. They do whatever. The comic book guys are even worse, right? Comic book guys, and I love comic book guy, right? And I was comic book guy. I actually did a comic book myself, right? But geez, they're not research guy. Comic book guy and research guy are not the same guy, and we see that all the time. But the important thing is that we still keep these deities alive. We still keep talking about them. We still keep having conversations about them. So right now, I know that I'm going to have to talk about entropy. I'm trying to get back to doing 2 MythLabs a day. And so maybe if I have the energy, I'll come back tonight and I'll talk about entropy. If not, maybe I'll save that one for tomorrow and I may slip something else in. So if you want to come back about this time, I'm trying to be more consistent about being on at 11 a.m. my time. I think I was a little bit late. Look, probably an hour and a half late. CP time. But I'm going to try to work on my consistency. If you guys enjoy it, looks like the viewership at least has been good. Thank you, Kat, for always being present and contributing. And I definitely appreciate that. And it's definitely helping the channel grow. So it's not lost on me. That bit of a support for the channel. This definitely goes a long way with me. So I'm going to wrap up. I always 7:30 p.m. What? Where are you in the UK? Are you in the UK right now? Am I global? Is that what's going on here? 7:30 p.m. Okay, man, I'm out there further. I'm out there further than what I thought. I'm in deep waters now, right? And I definitely appreciate it. Our family is growing. You guys hear that? So if you're in our time zone, we got, London. Yes. Yes, that is a great thing. I love that. I absolutely do, right? So I'm in Louisiana. I'm in the American Southwest. I'm in Louisiana right now. So this is how far we're connected, talking about mythology and these guides bringing us together. So I'm going to go and eat myself a healthy lunch. Actually been preparing my meals. I cooked, right? I'm going to have a salad. And I don't know what after that, but I'm going to have a salad. I'm going to eat a healthy lunch. And then I'll be back working on some mythology. And I'll probably do some myth readings for these guys for the story time. You know, every night I do a story. I have a stream of myths that are going to go down. So you guys can check those out tonight if you're into it. Some good calm reading. So I'll work on that, and then I'll be back tomorrow. And in the meantime, you guys have any questions, anything you want to drop, again, I'm here for your mythological queries. So as always, hit me up, and I appreciate everybody stopping in. And I will be back again later on